Welcome to Shipp's Tips episode 17. Now, what these Shipp's Tips are all about is coming out with me whilst things are fresh in my mind, and that's exactly what we're doing today at a lovely fishery called Ivy House near Swindon. Now, over the last couple of months, I've been doing lots of method feeder fishing, not just for carp, but for skimmers, Carasio, F1s, and obviously the odd carp, which are obviously a bonus. But ground bait has been the key. You know, I know we talk about micros around the feeder, but for me, over the last month or so, ground bait has been so important. It's just putting more and more fish in my net. So what I'm going to do first off, I've put a bit of gear down, but like I said, let's get the ground bait mixed up, let's get it dead right, and also I'm going to also show you the hook baits that I've been using, because again, fish in the winter time and also the summer, they're really picky some days, or a lot of days now. I find it's actually getting harder and harder some days to actually get the fish on the hook, especially fishing with a method feeder. So let's get back over to the next platform and I'll mix the ground bait first off and show exactly what I'm looking for with the ground bait I'm going to be using today. Right, so I've just put my gear down now. Now, the most important thing is get my bait mixed up that I'm going to be using today at this lovely little fishery called Ivy House near Swindon. Now, there's two new products that Sonubaits have brought out this year, which is the Match Method Mix Marine, which is a high halibut based ground bait. And believe you me, I've messed about with halibut pellets in ground bait form for a lot of years, and trying to get a ground bait right has been virtually impossible because it just doesn't mix up. But Sonu have done this. It is that easy. It's just like mixing up your normal Match Method mix, which I know we all love and I love as well. But this stuff is going to come into play not just in the summer, but all year round. I know it is. I've used it. I've caught loads of fish. It's an active ground bait. It's got, you know, it's got the oil content in it, and it smells, which is really important. And obviously I'll run through how easy it is to use as we get fishing today. But before I mix that up, because I've got my containers here that I'm going to measure everything out, because I know that's what I get asked a lot is, Des, we love the marine, but how do you mix it, which I'll show you. But one of the awesome products this year has to be the micro band and wafters. It's something that I was in my garage. Obviously I don't put it on my social media page, everything that I do in my garage, because obviously we're working on products and stuff. But when I was in my garage, I've got 8mm bandams and I'm cutting them down with a knife. I go out, use the little bits of bandams on the hair, and I was catching a lot of fish that I couldn't catch on different baits. And that's why going to the factory, speaking to Ian, who's the manager at the factory, saying, Ian, we could do with some real tiny bandams. He's like, Des, what you on about? But things move on. You know, we have to move up, and I know how important it is, and you guys will. I go to venues where you can chuck a method feeder out and you'll have the fish tailing up and your tip doesn't move. And using real tiny hook baits some days makes a colossal difference. There's no doubt about it. And I've seen that in my own eyes, chopping little bits of bandams down. So that's why we've done the bandam micros. You know, they're wafters because it's the in thing. Totally, I'm convinced it catches you more fish with having a light hook bait. Obviously there's 3 different variations. We've got the micro banoffees, we've got the krill and squid, and we've also got, which is my favourite actually, because I've sort of got into these sort of fluoro hook baits, especially when you're fishing with dirty, you know, fishing venues with dirty water. So there's 3 different versions. So there's one out there for everybody really. So anyway, let's get down to mixing the ground bait, because that's going to be the most important thing that we're going to be putting around the feeder. Now, if you follow this simple step by step, you can't go wrong. So I've opened my bag, I've got a 3-pint container there. Take your feeder out, because every Match Method mix, as we know, you get a free method feeder. So take him out, you can use him on the day, it's up to you. So fill your 3-pinter up, because around, if you get a 2 kilo bag, which Match Method mix is, it's around 6 pints of bait. And that's proper there, it's a proper kilo. So we'll stick that in a bucket, like that. And then, that little container there, if you use a 1 pint bait container, to 3 pints of ground bait. So 1 pint of water to 3 pints of ground bait. The normal step by step, which is what you use for a normal match method mix, you can't go wrong. That's a 1.3, so I'm not going to put a full tub in. So it's probably about that far from the top, but get yourself somewhere around about a 1 pint container. You can even put a pen mark on it. Once you've got it right, put a little biro mark on it, or a Sharpie pen mark on it, so you know when you go fishing. If you don't want to mix the whole 2 kilos up, put 3 pints in, put a pint of water with it, and your job done. So stick that straight in, no messing about. Like I said, round bucket, and it will actually go really, really wet. And you'll think, oh my God, what have I just done to that? But don't worry, it will all come back. So if you look at that now, that's like cement. But don't worry about it. This is what match method mix is all about. It's really, really simple. And what I would do then is just make sure all the dry ground bait's mixed in and leave it. And that's what you want to do, because I've not set up yet. I've literally put my box down on the platform. I'm mixing my ground bait. And now I'll leave this for at least 20 minutes. And then what I'll do, I'll come back to it. I'll also use a fine riddle. It's something that I've been using over the last 18 months or so, especially during the winter months when the fish are really sort of not having it. I like putting it through one of the smaller Preston riddles, which I'll do in a minute, and then I'll show you the finished ground bait and what we're going to be fishing with. All ready to go now. Now I've finished my ground bait off, but one thing that I do, and you've probably already seen it anyway, is I do actually use the Preston Pinky riddle, and it's a finer riddle from your normal maggot riddle. And I think anything to do with like method feeder fishing, especially when it's not the height for summer, get a smaller riddle, because the finished ground bait, honestly, it makes a big difference. It does in my mind. And I think when you're fishing for cute fish and you want a nice light fluffy ground bait, put it through a finer riddle. So let's just show you exactly what I mean by that. So there's me finished ground bait in there. That's like obviously the match method mix marine. And like going back to what I was saying earlier, to get that ground bait like that with halibut in it, honestly, it was a big development. It took a lot of time, and it's so easy to mix. It is as easy as your normal match method mix, so it's really impressive, but it's perfect there. And because I've left that for half an hour, really important, leave it for like 20 minutes, half an hour, after you've mixed it like I showed you, and then put it through a riddle. If you haven't got a fine riddle like that, then just use the normal maggot riddle, but if you can, try and get a finer riddle. And that's just dried out now. I mean, that is absolutely perfect. So 3 pints of ground bait to a pint of water, you can't go wrong. Let's get on to the gear that I'm going to be using. Really, really simple. This match, it is method feeder fishing. I've got my trusty little 9-foot ignition. It's a rod that I absolutely love, and it's a rod that I've been fishing over the last couple of months. And because it's quite a soft action rod, for what I've been catching, like these Carasio, honestly, they are a pain. They do come off. You always lose a few, but obviously you don't want to lose if you were using like a sort of more aggressive rod, I think you'd pull out of even more. Then coming down to the feeder is my favorite feeder of all time, which is the ICS inline flat method, but 20 grams. It's definitely, when you're fishing for these smaller carp, these Carasio skimmers, if the wind allows, and if obviously the distance you're fishing allows, try and get down to a 20 gram feeder. Again, it stops you pulling out of the fish. A simple hook length, I've got 0.17 power line down to an 18 KKMB hook. Now I've put an 18 on there with a small band because I'm fishing with these micro bandams. So obviously I suit that. You could drop the hook length down. I was actually fishing at Stafford Moor with an 0.11 hook length. So because I am fishing for Carasio, and fishing in Italy, speaking to my friend over there, Angelo, when I went over there last time, which was a few years ago now, he said, Des, you need to start fishing lighter hook lengths. And I started fishing 0.11, and to catch these Carasio in that, it made a big difference. It was, obviously if you're fishing for big carp, you can't do it. But when you're going to somewhere like Stafford Moor and you're not fishing for carp, you're fishing for skimmers and Carasio, it's always worth dropping your hook lengths down. But today at Ivy House, I'm going to be trying to catch carp because it is that sort of venue. So 0.17, simple quick change speed on there. I've got 6 pound sinking feeder mono to a size 420 reel, so it's standard stuff. So let's get going. I've already cast out. I've got myself where I want to start. I'm not starting right up against the island today. I've actually come off about 1.5 meters, and I reckon it's about 3 foot deep. I actually chucked my feeder out there with nothing on it and trying to get the nice count. Up against the islands today at the moment, it's still quite cold even though I'm sat in a hoodie, so I don't want to go right against the island straight away. So let's get the method loaded up. My favourite colour at the moment on these micro bandems is the little pink one. They're beautiful. They literally are the same size as a 4mm hard pellet. So get that on the band. Look at that. Get me mould. So I'm just going to half fill the mould, start off with. Stick the hook bait in the middle. Look at that. For a halibut based ground bait to do that is beyond belief. And that is like quite firm already, but I do always give it a little bit of a squeeze. You can vary that as you go along. Look at that, absolutely mint. So let's get him out there. Well, I can't wait. I love me method feeder fishing. Not a very big cast. Get the line down. I got my stopwatch out as well. And that is so important, honestly. Fishing Whiteacres last week, you know, to me, using a stopwatch, you don't need it. You don't need it some days because the bites are coming so quick and fast, you don't need it. I'm gonna have to set me, just get myself sorted out here because that is literally the first cast. So I'm gonna take a couple of wraps off. Let's get myself sorted out. Got my little butt rest set up there. And it's going to take a while. The nice thing is as well, this lake's actually quite coloured. But I have got to fish on a bit of an angle to fish where I want to fish. And get yourself all, I always mess about while I'm fishing. I just get everything deaded, just as I sort of want everything. Like that. So I've got all my hands free. There's no messing about. Now there's one thing as well what I found over the last month or so. It wasn't always the case of actually chucking your feeder in the same spot every time. If you had a little run of fish, you could then sort of move 4 or 5 meters, especially if you had an island peg, and start again. It wasn't about chucking it in the same spot. And you'll find that with F1s and Caraccio, they sort of come to you, and then it's the same as the pole. If you think about a lot of the pole videos that we do, F1 fishing, especially when the water's a bit colder, you know, you can go in, you have a run of fish, and they just sort of fade away, and then you go on your other line, you don't even have to feed it, and you get a run of fish. And that's no different to the method. And that's something I find as well, is like I said, moving around, keeping 2 lines going, even if they're on an angle like that, especially if you've got an island chuck, it just catches you that odd better fish. Obviously, if you're getting loads of indications, you just stick with it. My day on Trelawney, when I drew Trelawney Lake at Whiteacres, it was basically a 1-line job, because I was getting, I caught some skimmers, I was getting indications, and I had to keep casting all the time. It was really good fishing, but frustrating, because sometimes you cast out, you get these little indications. It could be anything. It could be roach, it could be skimmers, it could be little, you know, little baby F1s, but really, really interesting fishing as well. There was no point me having 2 lines that day, where when I went to Stafford Moor, I had 2 lines going, and it made a big difference. And obviously these little bandems, little hook baits, just make a huge difference. There's no doubt about it. Let's just have another cast. I'm not going to leave it there. I'm not going to leave it there long. I want to get a bit of bait out there, because the air temperature's warmed up the last couple of days. And then try and do that. What I do is have my rod under me bum like that, bring the tub to you, fill your mould up. Just makes everything nice and easy and quick. Little squeeze. Don't ever put your rod down. You don't need to put your rod down. See, so many people put their rod down behind them. Just let that line sink. Like that. Little tweak of the reel. Literally, I've just got a slight bend in it. And that's one thing you've got to bear in mind when you start fishing with lighter feeders like 15-20 grams. You've only got to have a slight bit of tension on it. If you're fishing up against an island, obviously most venues will have a slope, so don't put any sort of pressure on the tip at all, because the feeder will move down the slope. Well, that's the first wrap round, and believe you me, that was a proper wrap round. If I'd have been on my phone then, I reckon the rod would have gone in. So just a few quick casts at the start. One of those little pink bandams on. So that's great. Oh, hello. I'm a bit careful with this actually. They scrap like hell in here. Little commons, most of them, and they go like stink. But it's lovely to get a few bites. So I've actually cast that, not right tight to the island at the moment. I think that's a... They're a lovely sized carp, them. They're the ones that keep feeding, you know, you can keep casting all the time. Especially this time of year when it's not bright. You see that pink bandam in there. I actually just changed over from like one of the bright ones to like one of the washed out ones. Lovely little common though. Ooh. So let's get him back, see if I can get another one. And just sort of keep working now. Just leave that bandam on. That's what's so nice about that ground bait as well. It's so easy to load on the mould. Just crush that in. I'm going to double load it just to get a bit of bait in. I think because the temperature's warmed up the last couple of days, because it has been absolutely freezing last week for a few days. Look at that. Just give that a nice little squeeze in the palm of the hand. Really important, even when it's cold. And there's like a little, I think between the two islands, obviously there's a little bar that goes across. So it's not just about chucking to islands, you know, you can just chuck it in open water. I reckon that bite come within about 2 minutes. Got my little stopwatch going. I said, and don't be scared to actually move about a bit. I mean, there's quite a lot of options on this peg. I can go like smack in front of me. I can go slightly to the right of the islands. I can fish in the little gaps. And I'm sure a couple more days of this sun, you know, it would warm up and the fish would be tight to the islands. You could actually cast right tight, and you'd actually probably see just a few tail patterns as well. But I think at the moment, with it still being cold last night, it might happen later on, but not yet. And that will depend on the depth. When I actually cast to the island, it didn't seem that deep. I reckon it was like that deep. And I just wanted to come off for a little bit. I have to excuse the plane. And I'm not going to leave it there for like too long either. That's what using a stopwatch can help you the most. I think it's the most important thing that I found using a stopwatch, is you don't leave it there too long. I know it's different some days when the fish aren't feeding and it's really, really tough. It doesn't make any difference. But to me, method feeder fishing is about, a lot of it is about timing. It's getting your ground bait right, it's getting your hook baits right, and then it's about, you know, chucking it in the right place but not leaving it there too long. The fish are really crafty on some of these venues. Some of the venues I go, like I said earlier, you can actually chuck your feeder out, and you might only be fishing in sort of 18 inches, 2 foot of water, and you'll actually see the tail patterns of the fish, and you've got a job to catch. That's when you've got to mess around, casting more often, changing your hook baits, those smaller hook baits, sometimes putting bigger hook baits on, you know. But for me, over the last couple of years, I just find these little tiny hook baits are just the way forward, even for the big fish. They're so educated into eating your ground bait, they're so educated eating micro pellets, and that's when you've got to come up with like little hook baits that make a big difference. So I'm just sort of trying to feel my way into it now, but I've got to be on it. I can't really, you know, literally a blink of an eye and the rod just it's like they've had a bit of a run up to take your hook bait. But there's no, you know, we haven't long been going, so you've got to expect to build your peg up a little bit. But there's no little knocking and stuff like that. I mean, that's something else I'm looking for. Some of the venues I fish, you literally cast the feeder out and you might only get one little knot like that, and you don't get a bite. You just will wind back in, load your feeder up again and cast it back out, because it's like you've missed your opportunity. If you leave it there long enough, it probably will go around. But my way of thinking is, I'll cast back out again, I'll get one 5 times as quick, and through a 5-hour match, you'll be putting a lot more fish in your keep net. There we go. Oh, I don't know if Jake had that on camera then, but that was like a real fierce bite. I've just missed it. It's like it spat the hook bait out, or it didn't quite hook itself. Just check everything. If I can get out of my feeder. Perfect. So unfortunately I missed that one. That happens, it happens to me. So I'm just gonna wrap some bait round, double load the feeder. I'm going to put some bait on the feeder first, and then put a little bit on over the top, so you've got a little bit more ground bait going on there, like that. Give a nice big squeeze. Nice plop. And just take your time sinking your line. Make sure you don't move the feeder at all. Get everything set up like that, and just see the line. It's just enough tension to keep the line going towards where you cast. That's all you need. Just tweak that a little bit. And then colours, again, that's why we do the little bandams like we do in the bigger size bandams. The colours, honestly, on certain venues, different colours are unbelievable. You can put a pink one on some venues. It's, you know, you catch a few fish, then you put a different colour on, and it's just unbelievable how many more fish you catch. And people say to me, do you think it makes a lot of difference? And I always say, well, you look at maggot colours, you've got red and white. Some venues I go to, white is amazing. Other venues, white is a waste of time. So if you look at it like that, having different coloured hook baits, it's an absolute no-brainer. You've got to try it. Don't get too confused with it, because once I found a hook bait which I think's the best, I just stick with it until I need to change, or I think I need to change. For me personally, pink is the sort of fluoro pink or the washed out pink. For me personally, I just seem to catch a lot of fish on that colour. It's a bit like fluoro pink is, really. I think that's probably the way I look at it. I catch a lot of fish on fluoro pink is, you know, with a maggot and a pinky in the winter time when I'm fishing for F1s and skimmers. And I think it's probably sort of in my mind that that's a real good colour for fish. There's a tiny little indication then. But there is skimmers in here. And sometimes, some of the venues I go, sometimes if you don't want to if you're trying to target the carp and you start catching skimmers, sometimes you're better off moving. I know you don't want to move because there is fish in your peg, but the skimmers tell you that there's probably not, the carp have sort of moved away. So sometimes you're better off starting another line. Unless you obviously want to try and catch the skimmers as well, then it doesn't matter. Another tiny little indication then. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that because that'll give me a good indication to wind back in and recast out again. I'm not going to leave it there much longer now because I've had like 3 little tiny indications. I'm not bothered whether it's a carp or a skimmer, I don't know, but I'm not going to leave it there much longer. I see a lot of people feeder fishing and they're just not quite active enough, and believe me, you have to be on it. Some days the harder you work, the more fish you catch, and that even applies with a method feeder. It's no different. Another tiny little dig. Some another cast. Definitely some up round the feeder then. Like I said, do that, put your rod under your bum like that. You can bring your tub over to you with your ground bait in. Just makes it so much easier. Like that. Put that back, little squeeze, pick your rod up. Everything's all nice and fast, nice and smooth. Just get that line down. On your little butt rest. Little tweak of the reel. Well, that didn't take long at all, and that is the importance. I think it's only a skimmer, but even them fish, they're on your feeder immediately. I mean, that was out there for less than a minute. But these are fish, you know, fishing little method. Sometimes you catch a lot of skimmers, a lot of carp, F1s. Nice skimmer, eh? It's on that little pink bandem again. Woo. I mean, they are a proper greedy fish on the right day. Just about £1.25. It's that little washed out bandem on there. Just load that up exactly the same. So I'm always messing around with loading it up as well. That time I actually double loaded it. So what I've done, I've put a little bit of ground bait on my feeder like that, squashed it on, and then put some loose over the top. So a little bit more ground bait in the mould. And I'm always messing around with that, and then just top him off with a bit more ground bait. A little bit of a squeeze, but not too hard. So I know that's sort of melting off the feeder really quick. Let's get that line down again. The bites off of the carp have been so aggressive. And it's weird that you go to certain venues and some bites. I went to Belingi, I fished a festival at Whiteacres, and it was amazing. That I caught some big carp as well, and the bites were like this. Like, it's like a skimmer bite. And then you go to venues like this and they're smaller carp and they're absolutely unbelievable. Bites go round so fast, it's literally like a blink of an eye. Even some of the skimmer bites are like really aggressive. And I'll see what happens now, and if I keep getting an odd skimmer bite and there don't seem to be any carp, I'll just move. I'll cast to a different area of my peg. There we go. Another skimmer, I think. That was more like an actual skimmer bite, that bite. Nice fish, you know. And you learn a lot, even if you catch skimmers, like moulding your feeder a different way, different hook baits. Lovely and clean, though, these fish. Absolutely immaculate. Another nice skimmerlet, probably a little bit smaller, probably £1 that one. You can see there's a little bit of ground bait left in my feeder there, which I don't mind that at all. And that's what's so nice about that Match Method Mix Marine. It's a bit oily. You can't actually get it to stick on your feeder more than some of the natural Match Method Mix that we do. So double load him like that, little squeeze, get him out there. Quite shallow water as well, that, for skimmers, to be honest. Get that line down. Certainly not, you know, it's not the time of year yet where you can put your rod down and sometimes you get a bite before you actually get the line sunk. That's not happening. The cold nights are still here. Let's just load me mould up ready. When I'm catching lots of fish, I do that. I actually got the mould already loaded up, you know, because all the little time that you, especially being a match angler, all the time you spend less here and out there, you're obviously going to catch more fish. There you go. Oh, he's winding, coming in towards me, this one. That's actually come steaming off the island straight at me. So that's been out there 25 seconds. And like I spoke about, really, really important. You've got to work hard some days. You know, especially maybe sort of, if you're a match angler like me, you might get a few at the start, then it goes really tricky midday, but you've just got to keep going through it. Another little common again. But it's been brilliant because it's just been like really nice fishing, odd skimmer, odd carp. And we've only been fishing for a couple of hours, and I know it's going to get better and better. Fishing them little bandoms. That lovely ground bait, which I can adjust on my feeder to suit what I think's happening with my peg. Look at that. They're like 2.5 pounder. All little commons. Beautiful fish, eh? Perfect for the method feeder, you know, when you want to get bites. But the fish are absolutely freezing cold. I mean, I am sat here in a hoodie today, but believe me, the water is absolutely freezing. But unfortunately, you guys have got to go. I'm actually going to carry on because I know the fishing's going to get better and better. I'm sure you've picked up some great tips on, you know, the importance of getting your ground bait right. You know, that match method mixed marine is absolutely beautiful around a method feeder, as well as pole fishing. Them little hook baits for not just these sort of fish, but for Crashio, F1s and skimmers are going to be absolutely deadly. Let's get him back. I hope you picked up some nice tips, and see you on the next episode of Shipp's Tips.